Hello, friends. Welcome to Enjoy English. This is our wonderful host, Bernice.
This is our most handsome host, Shane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The most handsome in this room.
Yes.
No, actually,
yes.
I think the director is
so far, yes.
pretty handsome too. All right, we're looking at an article about loneliness. That's pretty sad.
Do you feel lonely sometimes?
Sometimes, but not now because I've got you.
Yeah, thank you.
But I think everybody experiences loneliness from time to time, right? So the title of the article is The Global Fight to Help the Lonely.
Fight, fight, fight.
Yeah, we're going to fight, the global fight. So global, the globe is like the earth. So this just means like all over the world is fighting to help the lonely.
没错，所以我们今天的标题呢，就是一个全球性的一个斗争，一个战斗，哈，就是说呢，我们要帮助这个 fight 是 to 针对呢 help the lonely，the 后面加上一个形容词，就是变成这个 lonely 的这样的一群人，所以有一群人就是所谓的他们后来有一个，等一下我们在文章里面会知道孤独的一个 minister， 一个大臣，他主要就是让你不要再孤军奋战，大家都会帮助你的。
Wow, okay. And the subtitle here is Feeling lonely or being alone is a bigger problem than we think. Because we all know, of course, it's not nice or fun to be lonely, but it's an even bigger problem than we think. So that's pretty scary.
没错，所以他这边的次标题讲的就是说呢，有的时候我们感到孤单啊，或者有时候你想要独自一个人。当然有的时候我们会真的想要 be alone， 想要一个人就是自己想想事情或者是怎么样，但是呢他却认为说有的时候这个时候变成一个更这个严重的问题，比我们所想象的还要严重。
Okay, well, let's get into this article.
好的。
The global fight to help the lonely. Today, many countries are facing the problem of loneliness.According to a British commission, more than 9 million UK citizens feel lonely some or even all of the time. Reports from other countries, like the US and Australia, suggest similar findings. Young people may experience loneliness due to the popularity of social media, while the elderly may live alone and have no one to talk to. Loneliness can have negative effects on people's health. A study showed that feeling lonely or being alone for a long time could reduce an individual's lifespan by 15 years. To address this problem, the UK appointed the world's first Minister for Loneliness in 2018. Since then, the UK government has proposed some strategies to improve the situation.These include holding events to raise public awareness and building new transportation lines for people who are at the highest risk of isolation. Apart from the UK, Japan also has its own Minister for Loneliness. In 2021, as the suicide rate rose because of social isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic,Japan appointed a minister for loneliness to cope with the mental health crisis. With reports of increased loneliness around the world, the need for loneliness ministers becomes ever clearer.
All right, well, let's dive into the article.Today, many countries are facing the problem of loneliness. I would imagine every country in the world, I think everywhere there is loneliness.
没错，所以才刚开始说是 global fight，这是全球的一场战争，好，这场战斗。所以他说呢，在今天啊，其实很多的国家都面临孤独这个问题。
According to a British commission,More than 9 million UK citizens feel lonely some or even all of the time.
Wow.
Could you imagine feeling lonely all of the time? That's pretty sad.
真的，所以呢，这个研究是根据一个英国的委员会所表示的啦。他是说呢，以英国来讲，哈，大概已经有超过900万的英国的 citizens， 就是他们的公民。你可以看到这个字前面就是 city 这个字变来的哈，所以他们的这些市民公民呢，他们就会感觉到，哎呦，自己好孤单哦。而且是 some， 就是有，甚至呢是有时候就会感觉到孤单，这个是还好，因为有的时候确实你一个人嘛，对，都会有感到孤单。可是后面这个就不太好了 ，even 甚至是 all of the time， 就是一直都觉得好孤单，我都怎么都旁边没有朋友，没有家人陪着我，感觉好像独居的人一样啊，所以呢，这个是比较不太好的。
That's pretty sad. 9 million.
对，900万人
of the citizens there. Whew, okay. Reports from other countries like the U.S. and Australia suggest similar findings.
American people also
American
feel
people
lonely all the time.
Some American,
Not Shane.
Some, yeah.
He has a beautiful wife.
I've got a beautiful wife. I've got great coworkers.
Yes.
Great students. How could I feel lonely?
That's true.
But even I feel lonely sometimes. Everybody feels a little bit of loneliness, right? Yeah, so also in Australia, they suggest similar findings. So that just means that there are similar findings. They see the same thing in Australia and in the U.S. Yes. It's about the same.
好，所以他说呢，他们也有一些报告是从其他国家来的，就是不是只有英国。他说像美国呢或澳洲，其实他们也会 suggest 这边就是 show，就是一样的，它显现出相同的这样的发现。所以这个 suggest 就不是我们讲的 I suggest you， 这个不是那个建议的意思。
Young people may experience loneliness due to the popularity of social media, while the elderly may live alone and have no one to talk to. Okay, so
just what you said, they have numerous net pals.
Yes.
Just a handful of real friends in their life.
Yeah, what happens when, you don't have your phone in your hand or you're not in front of your computer, real life comes back at you and you realize, oh, I don't have anybody next to me. 旁边没有什么人. It's just me and my smartphone. That's a lonely feeling. And of course, we know that a lot of elderly, especially in Western countries, right? Like we're talking about in the UK, the US, Australia, older people are often left alone. Their families don't really take care of them like they do in other countries like Taiwan. So it's a big problem. I remember my grandmother was quite lonely after my grandfather passed away. She lived by herself. And, I tried to call her as much as possible and see her, but you could tell she was still quite lonely.
Yeah, that's true. OK, 好，所以最后一句话就是说呢，年轻人呐，其实呢也是有可能，你不要以为你年轻，你好像朋友很多，你也是会经历这种寂寞的时候。他说，那主要的原因呢 ，due to 就是 because of， 因为这些 social media 这些社群媒体它的普及性，所以年轻的人也会经历到孤独。While 而呢，这些 elderly，the elderly 就是这些比较年长的一些人呢，如果他们是像刚才 Shane 老师讲他的 grandma，就是自己住的话呢，也因为没有人可以聊天，所以也会觉得孤单。
Definitely. Okay, why don't we take a short break and we'll be right back.
好的。
Okay, welcome back. So I wanted to ask you, do you have grandmother or grandfather?
Yes, of course. I have grandmom, grandfather. Yeah.
And do they?
They live in Kaohsiung, the south of Taiwan. Yeah, but my niece, she's there with them, so they don't feel lonely.
There you go. So you often have this multi-generational living situation in Taiwan that is quite rare in a lot of Western countries. Yeah, you don't have the multiple generations living together. Each generation, once you are an adult, you fly out of the nest and then you're gone. And then no one comes back to move in with you when you're old, so that's pretty common. So,
对，所以刚刚 Shane 老师讲，就是他们西方国家的话呢，比较不会有这种 multi-generation， 就是多个世代住在一起的这样的一个状况。通常就是他们成年之后，就是已经到其他的地方去了，所以老年人就会住在一个地方。对。
Right. Okay. So loneliness can have negative effects on people's health. Okay. So I guess that makes sense. Sure. If you are lonely, health could be mental or physical health, right? So if it have a negative effect on something means that it causes something bad. So being lonely can cause you or could cause some change in your health. And in this case, we're talking about negative things.
没错，所以这边就是讲说呢，这个孤独啊，确实会对于人们的健康产生比较负面的这些影响，所以我们当然也可以用 can affect people's health negatively.
Right, and we have physical and mental health.
对。
And I would imagine that this would be a huge problem for your mental health when you are lonely.
身心的健康都会受到负面的影响。
Right. Okay. A study showed that feeling lonely or being alone for a long time could reduce an individual's lifespan by 15 years.
Wow, 15 years. My gosh.
So now we're talking about physical well-being. So it's not, like you would know, obviously, our mental well-being, feeling lonely, but to affect us physically to where our lifespan actually decreases. That's pretty crazy.
好，所以这个句子他又讲到了另外一个研究。他说有一个研究呢，就这么样的显示出呢，这个如果你感觉到你很孤单的时候，或者你自己一个人的时候呢，而且是很长的时间哦，不是说只是像我们讲的，有时候你想要放空一下，不是。它很长一段的时间这样子的话，有可能会降低你的寿命，而且它降低的这个幅度呢，是将近15年的寿命。
哇！
所以平均来讲，台湾的话大概差不多70、80岁吧，应该是对，所以你就少活15年。
哇！
这个by后面要加数字。
Yeah, I remember when my grandmother passed away, my grandfather, so this is the other side of my family, my mother's father, his wife passed away earlier than he did. And within like 1 year, he passed away, and he was only 69 years old.
Oh. That's not too old.
Yeah, he wasn't very old, and I think he was just really lonely.
对，所以就是刚才老师讲的嘛，他就是过了1年 ，grandfather 就去世，所以其实他就是很年轻，才69岁，所以我刚刚说也没有很年纪很大，但是就是你觉得孤单了。
Yeah, I think that's why he died.
Yeah,
My mother always said, I think he was just very lonely without your grandmother. Okay, so to address this problem, the UK appointed the world's first Minister for Loneliness in 2018.
哦，真的有这个职位耶。
Wow, a Minister for Loneliness. Well, that's great. I mean, they're taking the problem
I'm the Minister
seriously.
of Loneliness. Hi. I want to be the happiness minister of happiness.
The Minister of Loneliness. I wonder if they're lonely themselves. Sounds so sad.
I believe they have to experience at least loneliness, right?
So they could relate to other people,
yes.
right?
所以这边他们就说要解决这个问题。Address 这个字就是 deal with。你要解决，为了解决这样子，大家呢这个生命会缩短的这样子，感觉到孤单，所以呢，英国哟，他们就指派了 appointed， 就是去指派，而且这个字是比较正式的，他就去指派了世界第1位，叫做孤独大臣的这个职位，然后时间就是2018年。
Okay, so pretty recently. So since then, the UK government has proposed some strategies to improve the situation. Okay, so now they're coming up with strategies or ways to deal with this problem, trying to improve the situation. Right, so we know the situation here is people basically being very negatively affected, their health being affected by being lonely. So they need to address the problem.
没错，所以呢，这一个孤独大臣呢，他这个上位之后，他总不能什么事都不做啦。所以自从2018年开始 ，since then， 所以从2018年开始呢，这一个英国的政府呢就已经怎么样 proposed， 就是提议了，正式的提出来呢一些 strategies， 一些策略。那这些策略就是针对我们要去改善这样的一个状况。那刚刚老师就讲，这个状况就是你觉得孤单，然后呢，你可能会身心灵的健康会受到负面的影响，这样的状况。
So these include holding events to raise public awareness and building new transportation lines for people who are at the highest risk of isolation. Oh, okay. So isolation just means that you are off away from other people. So we're not only talking about, someone who has, like a neighbor, but they just don't really have anybody to talk to. Some people are actually physically unable because of their isolation from other people to interact with other people and to feel less lonely. So they're actually building transportation lines so people have access to maybe go to visit their friends, their family. They don't get stuck by themselves.
对，尤其是像西方国家，他们的 public transportation 可能 not very convenient.
No, especially in countries that are really big.
对，
it's difficult to have really good public transportation because it's just too big. The land is just too big, right? Whereas in Taiwan, it's pretty easy to link people together. It's a much smaller area.
That's true. 所以呢，他刚刚就讲了这些 strategies 包含哪一些呢？就包含了，比如说他们可能会举办一些这个活动。那这些活动呢，主要就是来raise public awareness， 就是提高大众的一些意识而且呢，他们要建立一些新的这些所谓的交通的这个路线，那就是让大家比较好可以到互相去拜访这个你的亲朋好友。好，那这样子的话呢，尤其是针对呢这一些人 people 什么样的人呢 ？Who are 这些人呢，通通都是面临很高风险的这样子孤立的风险的这些人，那就特别为了他们呢，做出这些活动啦，还有这样的一些新的交通路线。
Okay, let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
好的。
Apart from the UK, Japan also has its own minister for loneliness. Yeah, I think it's pretty well known that Japan has a very high suicide rate.
Yeah, that's
right. So we could imagine that a lot of that is because people are lonely, right? So it seems if I were to pick an Asian country that needed a minister for loneliness, I would assume it would be Japan.
对，所以Shane老师觉得应该也是 Japan。如果要设立一个像这样孤独大臣的这个职位，因为刚才就说了嘛，他的自杀率是最高的一个国家。所以 apart from 就说除了什么什么之外，好，我们当然也可以用 besides。好 ，besides 或者 in addition to， 除了英国，我们刚才讲的英国之外呢，日本他们也有自己的这样的一个孤独大臣的这个职位。好，那这个职位呢是等一下他会讲是在2021年成立的。
Right. So in 2021, as the suicide rate rose because of social isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic, Japan appointed a minister for loneliness to cope with the mental health crisis. Okay. So, as we all know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody became isolated.
Yes.
You had to be safe, right? But in a place that already has problems with loneliness, right, like here in Japan, COVID-19 really made it difficult for these people who are already lonely. Yeah. So they're doing this to help them cope with the mental health crisis. To cope with something means you could say to deal with something to address this thing.
没错。所以他这边的这个句子就是讲说是在2021年。那为什么呢？就是那时候大家都知道，因为 COVID-19 的关系。那如果在台湾的话，假设你是自己一个人，平常就租房子在外面，那因为在那个时候又有这个社交距离啦，或者是政府会鼓励大家不要乱跑，那你可能就没有办法去拜访你的朋友或你的家人，所以确实呢，就让这样子的一个孤独的感觉呢越来越严重。所以2021年呢，随着这样的自杀率，好 ，suicide rate 就自杀率呢 ，rose 是 rise 的过去式。升高了，就是因为在这个 COVID-19 这个疫情的时候呢，那个时候呢有所谓的社会隔离的状况，所以造成这个自杀率攀升。所以日本呢在那个时候就指派了这一个孤独大臣，那他的也是一样，他要来处理这些大家的心理上面健康的危机。
Right, and this is a crisis, a mental health crisis. A crisis just means a very serious, bad thing that has happened.Right? This crisis. Okay. With reports of increased loneliness around the world, the need for loneliness ministers becomes ever clearer. So with time, we're really realizing that it's actually quite important to have somebody, in the government, somebody looking and taking care of this population of people who are suffering from loneliness. After all, we are social creatures, right? We're social animals. And if we're not socializing and we are stuck, by ourselves, either physically or mentally, it's definitely a crisis.
没错，所以刚刚老师就讲说，我们本来就是社群的一个动物，所以如果大家还不能够互相彼此互动这一个社交应酬的话呢，那确实就会 stuck 在这个里面，那你就真的会觉得很孤单了。所以最后一个他就是讲说呢，因为现在有很多呢，全世界啊这些报告里面，越来越多的世界各地的报告都显示人们的这个孤独的这个感觉呢是 increased， 加了 ed 是表示这是已经是一个事实了，就是这个 loneliness 这个孤独的这个感觉呢，确实是已经增加的这样的一个事实。所以呢，对于这样子的一个孤独大臣的需求呢，就变得呢相当的清楚。意思就是说，本来就应该需要有一个像政府这边派来的一个人，然后他有这样的经验来帮助这一些所谓感到孤单的人。
很重要。
对，没错。
Okay, well, if you're feeling lonely, well, you don't need
Call
to.
Shane.
You've got us.
Yeah,
right?
yes.
So you can
watch our video.
Just watch the videos over and over again, and we're here for you.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.